There is a moment every night that quietly decides the shape of your entire life. It happens after the lights are off, after the noise fades, when no one is watching, and the mind finally speaks without filters. In that moment, most people unknowingly do the same thing. They replay their failures, judge themselves harshly, carry unfinished worries into sleep, and fall unconscious with a heart still at war. Night after night, they train their mind to suffer and wonder why peace feels so far away. But what if that final conversation you have with yourself each evening is the most powerful moment of your day? What if a few quiet words, spoken with awareness, could soften regret, dissolve anxiety, heal the heart, and slowly transform your entire life? Tonight is not just the end of a day. It is the threshold between who you have been and who you are becoming. Stay with this story until the end, because what you choose to tell yourself tonight may change how you sleep, how you wake, and how you live. If this reflection speaks to your heart, please subscribe to Buddhism in every moment. Your support helps this channel continue creating calm, meaningful videos that bring wisdom, peace, and healing into everyday life. Thank you for being here, and let us begin. Evening arrives differently than morning. Morning pushes, it demands. It pulls you into roles, responsibilities, and expectations before you have fully entered your own body. But evening does not ask. It waits. It softens the edges of the day and gently invites you to stop running, even if only for a moment. There is something ancient and deeply human about this time of day. When the sky darkens and the world grows quieter, a subtle shift happens inside us. The masks loosen. The urgency fades, and beneath the surface of routine, the heart finally has space to speak. Most people don't notice how sacred this moment truly is. They treat the evening as something to get through. A blur of screens, noise, and distraction meant to numb the leftover weight of the day. They collapse into bed, still carrying conversations that never ended, mistakes that were never forgiven, worries that have no place in the night. And so the day never really ends. It follows them into sleep. It shapes their dreams. It greets them again in the morning, unresolved. But Buddhism teaches something radically different. It teaches that evening is not an afterthought. It is a threshold, a bridge between what has already happened and what has not yet arrived. A quiet crossing where the mind can either carry its burdens forward or gently set them down. In traditional Buddhist practice, reflection at the end of the day is not about judgment. It is not about evaluating success or failure. It is about returning to awareness, returning to the body, returning to the simple truth of being alive, right now, without needing to prove anything. This is why the evening holds such power. When the external world quiets, the internal world becomes louder. Feelings that were pushed aside during the day rise to the surface. Regret, gratitude, loneliness, relief, a sense of having tried, or a sense of having fallen short. Evening does not create these emotions. It reveals them. And revelation, while uncomfortable, is also a gift. Because what is seen can be met. What is met can be softened, and what is softened no longer needs to be carried so heavily. In the Buddhist view, each day is a complete life in miniature. It is born in the morning, unfolds through effort and experience, and dies at night. The sun sets, and with it, that particular version of you, those moments, those thoughts, those exact circumstances will never exist again. This is not meant to create sadness. It is meant to awaken wisdom. When you truly understand that a day will never return, you stop demanding that it be perfect. You stop clinging to what went wrong. You stop postponing peace until some imaginary moment when everything finally makes sense. You learn to bow to the day, exactly as it was. Evening is the moment of that bow. It is the moment you can say, without resistance, this is what today was. Not more, not less. No rewriting, no bargaining, just truth. For people living in a world that never stops measuring, comparing, and demanding more, this kind of ending is revolutionary. It teaches the nervous system that it is safe to rest. It teaches the heart that it does not need to stay on guard. It teaches the mind that it does not have to solve life before sleep. There is deep compassion in this practice. Compassion for the body that carried you through the day. Compassion for the mind that tried its best. Compassion for the heart that felt more than it knew how to explain. Evening gives you permission to be human. To admit you are tired. To admit you care. To admit you are still learning. In Buddhism, wisdom is not found by escaping life, but by meeting it fully, especially at its quiet edges. Evening is one of those edges, a place where effort can dissolve into awareness, where striving can give way to acceptance, where the need to become can rest, even briefly, in the experience of simply being. When you honor the evening, you are not just preparing for sleep. You are shaping your relationship with life itself. You are teaching yourself how to end things with grace, how to let go without resentment, how to trust that not everything needs to be resolved right now. This is why the evening matters. It is not just the end of a day. It is a daily chance to come home to yourself. Night has a way of exposing what the day carefully hides. During the day, the mind stays busy enough to avoid itself. There are emails to answer, decisions to make, expectations to meet, roles to perform. Movement becomes a form of protection. As long as there is something to do, something to fix, something to chase, the deeper weight inside remains quiet. But when evening comes, that protection dissolves. The body slows, the world softens, and suddenly the mind has nowhere left to run. This is when rest should begin, but for many people, it doesn't. Instead of peace, the night fills with noise. Thoughts circle endlessly. Conversations replay. Regrets sharpen. Tomorrow's worries arrive early and refuse to leave. The body lies down, but the mind stays standing, alert, restless, tense. This is not because people are weak or undisciplined. It is because most of us were never taught how to end a day. In a culture that emphasizes productivity and forward motion, beginnings are celebrated. Endings are neglected. We are taught how to start projects, chase goals, and push through difficulty, but not how to close experiences with care. So the day remains unfinished inside us, even when the clock says it's over. Buddhist wisdom sees this clearly. It teaches that suffering does not always come from what happens during the day. Much of it comes from what we carry forward unnecessarily. The mind clings to moments that have already passed, believing that replaying them will somehow bring resolution. But replay only deepens the wound. It keeps the heart awake long after it needs rest. At night, the mind often becomes its own harshest judge. You remember what you should have said. You magnify what you didn't do well. You minimize what you did do. The day becomes a courtroom, and you place yourself on trial. This inner criticism feels productive, as if self-punishment will lead to improvement. But in truth, it only leads to exhaustion. The mind confuses reflection with rumination. Reflection brings clarity. Rumination brings suffering. The Buddha taught that an untrained mind is like a restless animal. It wanders endlessly, seeking satisfaction where none can be found. At night, when distractions fade, this restlessness becomes painfully obvious. The mind searches for closure, but it looks in the wrong places. It looks backward, trying to rewrite the past. It looks forward, trying to control the future. And in doing so, it misses the only place where peace exists, the present. This is why the mind refuses to rest. It does not trust that it is safe to let go. Safety, for the mind, has become tied to vigilance, to staying alert, to staying tense. Somewhere along the way, many people learned that if they relax too much, something will be missed, forgotten, or lost. So even in bed, the mind remains on guard. But Buddhism gently challenges this belief. It reminds us that rest is not negligence. Letting go is not failure, and ending the day does not mean abandoning responsibility. It means honoring reality. Reality is this: the day is already over. No amount of mental effort can change what has happened. No amount of worry can improve what has not yet arrived. The mind's refusal to rest is not wisdom, it is habit. A habit formed through years of pressure, expectation, and self-surveillance. The tragedy is not that the mind wanders at night. The tragedy is that people believe this wandering is necessary. Evening becomes a battleground instead of a refuge. Yet within this struggle lies an opportunity. The fact that the mind becomes restless at night is not a flaw, it is a signal. It is pointing to the unspoken weight you've been carrying, the unprocessed emotions, the unmet need for gentleness, the absence of closure. Buddhist wisdom does not tell you to silence the mind by force. It does not demand discipline or suppression. It invites understanding. When you see clearly why the mind refuses to rest, compassion naturally arises. You stop treating restlessness as an enemy. You begin to see it as a tired part of you, asking for care. Care does not mean indulging every thought. It means offering the mind something it has been missing: reassurance. Reassurance that it does not need to solve everything tonight. Reassurance that effort can pause without consequence. Reassurance that you are allowed to be unfinished. When the mind senses this safety, it begins to soften. Evening is not meant to be conquered. It is meant to be held. Held with kindness. Held with acceptance. Held with the quiet understanding that being human is already enough for today. The mind refuses to rest because it has not yet learned how to be released. And that release does not come from thinking harder, it comes from being met with wisdom. This is where the path begins. There is a quiet truth most people never realize. The final words you speak to yourself at night do not fade into silence. They sink. They travel deeper than daytime thoughts ever can. They slip past logic and settle into the subconscious, where they quietly shape how you sleep, how you dream, and how you wake. Evening is when the mind is most open and most vulnerable. The defenses built during the day soften. The body is tired. The willpower that filters thoughts grows thin. This is why the night can feel heavy, but it is also why it holds extraordinary power. In Buddhism, words are not seen as harmless. They are seen as seeds. What you repeat, you plant. What you plant, you nurture. And what you nurture eventually grows. Most people end their day planting seeds of anxiety without knowing it. They whisper criticism to themselves. They rehearse worries. They replay moments with regret. These words may feel automatic, even unavoidable, but they are shaping the inner landscape of tomorrow. A mind put to sleep with judgment wakes up tense. A heart put to sleep with fear wakes up guarded. This is not punishment. It is conditioning. Buddhist wisdom understands this deeply. That is why mindful speech begins not with what you say to others, but with what you say to yourself, especially at night. The Buddha taught that intention is the root of all experience. Evening words are intentions offered directly to the unconscious mind. When you lie down at night, your mind listens more closely than you think. It listens for safety. It listens for permission to rest. It listens for guidance on how to interpret the day that just ended. If the message it receives is harsh, the mind remains alert. If the message is kind, the mind begins to settle. This is why a few gentle, intentional words can do what hours of thinking cannot. Evening words are not affirmations meant to convince you of something false. They are reminders meant to return you to what is already true. True that you survived the day. True that you tried in ways no one saw. True that you are allowed to rest without earning it. When spoken at night, These truths do not argue with the mind. They soothe it. Modern psychology now echoes what Buddhist practice has known for centuries. The brain consolidates emotional memory during sleep. The tone of your inner dialogue before rest influences not just your dreams, but your emotional resilience the next day. A calm closing creates a gentler opening. But beyond science, there is something more intimate at work. Evening words become a form of self-relationship. They reveal how you treat yourself when no one else is watching. Whether you extend compassion or withhold it. Whether you speak as a harsh judge or a caring guide. Over time, this relationship becomes the foundation of how you experience life. Buddhism does not ask you to control the mind through force. It teaches you to guide it through wisdom. Evening words are one of the simplest and most profound ways to do this. They do not require belief. They require sincerity. You are not trying to fix yourself. You are not trying to improve the day. You are simply choosing how to close it. When the day is closed with awareness, the mind learns that life has rhythm. That effort has an ending. That rest is part of the path, not a reward for perfection. This is why what you tell yourself at night matters so deeply. Not because words are magic, but because the mind believes what it hears when it is tired and unguarded. If you offer it kindness, it learns kindness. If you offer it acceptance, it learns acceptance. If you offer it peace, it learns how to let go. Evening words do not change life overnight. They change direction quietly. Night after night, they reshape the inner climate of your being. And in time, you may notice something subtle but profound. You begin to wake up not already exhausted. You begin to meet the day with less resistance. You begin to feel that life is something you can enter, rather than survive. All from a few honest words spoken in the dark, when the heart is listening most closely. There is a sentence so simple that the mind resists it at first. Not because it is difficult to understand, but because it asks us to release something we have been gripping all day. Today is complete. These words do not argue with what happened. They do not pretend the day was perfect. They do not erase mistakes, disappointments, or unfinished tasks. They simply acknowledge a truth the mind keeps avoiding. This day has already ended. And yet, for many people, the day never truly ends. They carry it into the night like an open wound. They replay conversations they wish had gone differently. They revisit moments where they fell short. They mentally return to tasks left undone, believing that constant review is a form of responsibility. But what it really becomes is a quiet refusal to let go. Buddhist wisdom sees this clearly. It teaches that suffering often comes not from what happens, but from our unwillingness to accept that it has already happened. The mind clings to the day because it believes holding on will somehow fix it, but holding on only keeps the pain alive. To say today is complete is not an act of surrender. It is an act of honesty. It is saying to yourself, nothing more can be added to this day. Nothing can be removed from it. It has finished teaching whatever it came to teach. Now it is allowed to rest. This is incredibly difficult for a mind trained to measure worth by productivity. A mind that believes value comes from constant effort struggles to accept completion without perfection. It whispers that rest must be earned, that closure must be deserved. But Buddhism offers a different view. It reminds us that life moves in cycles, not checklists. Morning begins without asking if yesterday was handled well. Night arrives without demanding that everything be resolved. The sun does not wait for you to feel ready before it sets. It sets because that is its nature. In monasteries, when evening practice ends, a bell is often struck. The sound is clear and final. No explanation. No lingering. The bell does not apologize for ending early or regret ending late. It simply marks the truth this period is complete. Your day deserves the same clarity. When you tell yourself today is complete, you are striking that bell inside your own mind. You are giving yourself permission to stop negotiating with the past. You are allowing the nervous system to stand down from its constant vigilance. This is not avoidance. It is wisdom. Impermanence is one of the core teachings of Buddhism, not because it is comforting, but because it is real. Everything that arises passes away. Days, like lives, cannot be held open indefinitely. When we resist this truth, we suffer. When we accept it, something inside softens. Completion does not mean approval. Completion means release. You may still wish you had spoken differently. You may still feel sadness over what was lost. You may still care deeply about what remains unfinished. Saying today is complete does not deny any of this. It simply says none of this needs to be solved right now. There is deep compassion in that boundary. So much exhaustion comes from the belief that we must carry every unresolved feeling into sleep. But sleep is not the place for problem solving. It is the place for restoration. When the mind refuses to close the day, it denies the body the rest it desperately needs. Buddhist practice teaches us to honor endings, not rush past them. When a breath ends, another begins naturally. When a day ends, tomorrow will arrive without force. Trusting this rhythm is an act of faith, not in outcomes, but in life itself. Imagine, for a moment, placing the entire day gently down, not throwing it away, not labeling it good or bad, simply setting it aside. The conversations, the mistakes, the moments of effort, the moments of failure, all of it. You do not need to drag it into the dark. This practice changes something subtle but powerful. The inner critic loses its stage. The mind realizes it does not need to stay alert all night. The heart feels a quiet relief, like loosening a clenched fist it didn't realize it was holding. Today is complete becomes a form of self-respect. It respects your limits. It respects the reality of time. It respects the truth that you are human. And perhaps most importantly, it teaches the mind that you are allowed to stop. Not because everything is perfect, but because perfection was never the requirement. When this reflection becomes a habit, the quality of your nights begins to change. Sleep deepens. Dreams soften. Mornings feel less burdened. Not because life is suddenly easier, but because you are no longer carrying yesterday into today. The Buddha taught that wisdom is knowing when to act and when to let be. Evening is the moment for letting be, for closing the book without rereading every page, for trusting that whatever mattered today has already shaped you in ways you may not yet understand. So when night comes, speak these words gently, not as a command, but as an offering. Today is complete. Let the day rest. Let yourself rest. Tomorrow will arrive in its own time. Gratitude is often misunderstood as something polite, something we offer only when life has been generous. But in Buddhist wisdom, gratitude is not a reaction to good fortune. It is a way of seeing. When you reach the end of the day and tell yourself, "I am grateful for today's gifts," you are not pretending the day was easy. You are choosing to look at it with honesty instead of habit. The habitual mind scans for what went wrong, what was missing, what still feels unresolved. Gratitude gently turns the gaze elsewhere, not to deny pain, but to widen the field of awareness. Most days do not arrive wrapped in miracles. They arrive quietly, filled with ordinary moments that rarely ask for attention. A breath that came and went without effort. A body that carried you through another set of hours. A voice that answered when you spoke. A moment of silence between two demands. These are not dramatic gifts, but they are gifts all the same. The Buddha taught that suffering grows in the soil of craving. When the mind is trained to focus only on what it lacks, it becomes restless, dissatisfied, perpetually hungry. Gratitude interrupts this cycle. It does not say, "I have everything." It says, "I have enough in this moment to soften my heart." This shift is subtle, but its effects are profound. At night, the mind is especially vulnerable to stories of scarcity. It replays what you did not accomplish. It tallies what you still owe to others, to yourself, to an imagined version of who you should be. Gratitude quietly steps into that mental noise and offers a different accounting. Not an argument, not a correction, a reminder. You begin to notice that even on difficult days, something sustained you. Perhaps it was resilience you did not know you had. Perhaps it was patience practiced reluctantly. Perhaps it was the simple fact that you are still here, still breathing, still capable of reflection. Gratitude in Buddhism is deeply tied to mindfulness. To be grateful is to see clearly. It is to recognize the countless conditions that made this day possible. The food you ate did not appear on its own. The place you rested did not build itself. The air you breathed has been shared by countless beings before you. When this recognition settles in the heart, the sense of isolation begins to dissolve. You realize you were never carrying life alone. This understanding changes the tone of the evening. The body relaxes. The breath deepens. Resentment loosens its grip. Gratitude does not erase hardship, but it makes room for kindness to coexist with it. There is also a quiet humility in this practice. Gratitude reminds you that life does not owe you perfection. It offers moments, not guarantees. When you accept that, you stop demanding that every day prove its worth. You allow it to be what it was. Some days the gift is joy. Some days the gift is learning. Some days the gift is endurance. All of them shape you. When you whisper, "I am grateful for today's gifts," you are not listing achievements. You are acknowledging support. You are honoring the small mercies that often go unnoticed when the mind is rushing forward. This practice softens the inner voice. It shifts the heart from judgment to appreciation. Over time, it rewires how you relate to life itself. You begin to notice blessings, not because you force positivity, but because awareness has sharpened. Gratitude also prepares the mind for rest. A heart that recognizes what it has received does not need to stay alert for what it fears losing. It feels held. It feels grounded. Sleep comes more easily when the day is remembered with appreciation rather than accusation. The Buddha knew that gratitude is a form of liberation. It frees you from the endless chase for more by revealing the richness already present. It teaches you to bow to life not because it was perfect, but because it was given. So at the end of the day, pause. Let the mind slow enough to notice what supported you. Do not search for something extraordinary. Look for what was real. A breath, a moment of relief, a lesson learned, a kindness received or offered. Let gratitude fill the spaces where resentment used to live. Let it warm the heart like a quiet light before sleep. "I am grateful for today's gifts" is not a statement of satisfaction. It is a practice of awareness. And when practiced each night, it slowly transforms the way life is experienced, not by changing circumstances, but by changing how deeply you are able to receive them. Forgiveness is one of the hardest truths to sit with at night, not because it is complicated, but because it asks you to loosen your grip on pain you have learned to carry for a long time. When the world grows quiet, and there is no one left to blame or distract you, what remains is often a tightness in the chest, a mixture of regret, anger, shame, and unfinished hurt. This is why the evening is when unforgiven things speak the loudest. During the day, resentment hides behind busyness. Guilt disguises itself as responsibility. Self-judgment pretends to be discipline. But at night, when the mind no longer has tasks to cling to, these emotions surface without permission. They replay themselves again and again, not because they want to torture you, but because they want release. Buddhist wisdom teaches that forgiveness is not a favor you give to others. It is a release you give to yourself. Unforgiveness is heavy. It sits in the body like a stone. It tightens the jaw. It shortens the breath. It follows you into sleep and colors your dreams. When you hold on to resentment or self-blame, you are not protecting yourself. You are imprisoning yourself. The Buddha once compared anger and resentment to holding a burning coal with the intention of throwing it at someone else. The longer you hold it, the more it burns your own hand. Forgiveness is the moment you decide to open your palm. This does not mean denying what happened. It does not mean pretending pain was justified. It does not mean forcing yourself to feel something you do not yet feel. Forgiveness begins much more quietly than that. It begins with honesty. At night, when you tell yourself, "I forgive myself and others," you are not making a declaration of perfection. You are making a choice to stop carrying poison into rest. You are acknowledging that holding on to blame, whether directed outward or inward, has not brought peace. Self-forgiveness is often the hardest part. Many people are far more willing to forgive others than to forgive themselves. They replay their mistakes relentlessly, believing that self-punishment is the price of growth. But Buddhism teaches the opposite. Growth does not come from cruelty. It comes from compassion. You are human. You are acting with the understanding you had at the time. You are still learning. To forgive yourself is not to excuse harmful behavior. It is to recognize that shame does not produce wisdom. When you forgive yourself, you create the conditions for clarity. The heart softens enough to see what can be done differently next time. Without self-forgiveness, the mind stays trapped in the past. With it, the future becomes possible. Forgiving others is equally liberating, though often misunderstood. Forgiveness does not erase boundaries. It does not invite harm back into your life. It simply releases the belief that carrying resentment will somehow heal the wound. Buddhist teaching reminds us that those who cause harm are often acting from their own confusion and suffering. This understanding does not justify their actions, but it removes the illusion that hatred will bring relief. Hatred only multiplies pain. When you forgive others at night, you are not condoning what happened. You are choosing not to relive it again tomorrow. Forgiveness is a practice, not a single event. Some wounds soften quickly. Others take time. Even whispering the words, "I forgive," begins the process. The heart may not fully believe it yet, and that is okay. The intention itself matters. Imagine for a moment the weight you have been carrying. The unspoken apologies. The anger you never released. The harsh words you direct at yourself when no one else can hear. Now imagine setting that weight down before sleep. You do not need to resolve everything tonight. You do not need to feel completely healed. You only need to stop tightening around the pain. When forgiveness becomes part of the evening, something subtle changes. The body relaxes. The breath deepens. The mind no longer needs to stay alert, defending old wounds. Sleep becomes gentler because the heart is no longer at war. Buddhist wisdom teaches that peace is not found by winning internal battles, but by laying down the weapons. To say "I forgive myself and others" is to choose peace over punishment. It is to trust that holding on is not strength, and letting go is not weakness. It is to recognize that rest is a form of healing, and you are worthy of it. When this reflection becomes a nightly practice, resentment slowly loses its grip. Guilt loosens. Compassion expands. You begin to wake with less heaviness, not because life has changed, but because you are no longer carrying what does not belong in the present. Forgiveness clears the path for rest, and rest clears the path for wisdom. There is a quiet ache that often appears at the end of the day. It sounds like this: "I should have done more." It arises no matter how much effort you gave, no matter how long you stayed awake, no matter how sincerely you tried. The mind reviews the day and highlights what fell short, what could have been handled better, what version of you did not show up as expected. This ache is not proof of laziness. It is the result of living under constant self-measurement. When you reach the evening and tell yourself, "I practiced as best as I could," you are not lowering your standards. You are correcting a misunderstanding about how growth actually happens. Buddhist wisdom does not see life as a performance to be judged at the end of each day. It sees life as practice, and practice, by its nature, includes mistakes, pauses, uneven effort, and learning in motion. To expect perfection from practice is to misunderstand its purpose. The Buddha never taught that awakening comes from flawless behavior. He taught that it comes from sincerity, from showing up again and again, even when the heart is tired, even when the mind resists, even when clarity is incomplete. Most people carry a harsh inner teacher, one that believes discipline must hurt in order to be effective, one that confuses criticism with accountability. This voice grows louder at night, when distractions fade and the day's effort is finally visible. You remember the moments you lost patience, the moments you avoided discomfort, the moments you didn't live up to your own ideals, and the mind draws a conclusion: not enough. But Buddhism invites you to look again. Practice is not measured by outcomes. It is measured by intention and effort within conditions. You practiced when you paused instead of reacting. You practiced when you noticed your breath, even briefly. You practiced when you chose restraint, kindness, or honesty, even imperfectly. And yes, you practiced even when you failed, because noticing failure is itself awareness. Growth begins there, not in self-punishment, but in recognition. To say "I practiced as best as I could" is to acknowledge reality. Not the fantasy of who you think you should be, but the truth of who you were today, within the limits of your energy, understanding, and circumstances. This is not self-indulgence. It is self-respect. There is profound compassion in this reflection. It recognizes that you are learning how to be human in real time, that you are navigating pressures, responsibilities, and emotions that were never meant to be handled perfectly. Buddhist teaching often uses the image of a path, not a destination reached in one leap, but a road walked step by step. Some days the steps are steady. Some days they stumble. Both belong to the journey. When you judge the day as a final exam, you turn learning into fear. When you see the day as practice, you turn effort into growth. This shift changes how the body feels at night. The shoulders drop. The breath lengthens. The nervous system receives a message it rarely hears: you are allowed to be unfinished. Perfection demands constant vigilance. Practice allows rest. Think of a child learning to write. The lines are uneven, the letters imperfect. But no wise teacher tears up the page in disappointment. The effort itself is celebrated, because effort is how learning happens. You are no different. Each day, you are practicing patience in a world that provokes. You are practicing presence in a culture that distracts. You are practicing kindness while carrying your own pain. That matters, even when it doesn't look impressive. When you repeat this reflection at night, you begin to undo years of conditioning. You stop equating worth with productivity. You stop believing that only flawless days deserve peace. You begin to trust that sincerity is enough for now. This does not mean you stop growing. In fact, it allows growth to continue without burnout. When the heart is not crushed by self-judgment, it remains open. And an open heart learns faster than a shamed one. I practiced as best as I could becomes a quiet bow to your own effort. A recognition that today was one step on a long path, not a verdict on your value. And with that recognition, something essential happens. You no longer go to sleep fighting yourself. You no longer carry the day as evidence against you. You rest knowing that learning is still unfolding. Tomorrow will offer another chance to practice. Tonight, it is enough to acknowledge that you showed up, and that is more than enough to let the body rest. There is a quiet fear that visits the mind when the day finally slows down, the fear that what you are holding on to might not last. It shows up gently at first, in the awareness that joy fades, in the worry that pain might linger, in the unease that tomorrow could undo what today briefly gave. At night, when the world grows still, this fear often grows louder because the mind has nothing left to distract it from the truth it has been avoiding. Everything changes. For many people, this truth feels threatening. It sounds like loss, instability, a reminder that nothing can be secured forever. And so the mind resists it. It clings to good moments desperately and fights painful ones with equal force. This constant tension is exhausting, and it follows you into sleep. Buddhist wisdom offers a radical reframe: impermanence is not the problem. Resistance to impermanence is. When you tell yourself, everything changes, and that is okay, you are not giving up on life. You are aligning yourself with how life actually works. You are releasing the impossible task of holding things still in a world that is always moving. The Buddha taught that all conditioned things arise and pass away. This includes pleasure and pain, success and failure, clarity and confusion. When the mind forgets this, it panics. It treats each emotion as permanent, each setback as defining, each moment of happiness as something to guard with fear. But when impermanence is accepted, something loosens inside. You no longer grip joy so tightly that it turns into anxiety. You no longer resist sorrow as if it were a life sentence. You allow experiences to come and go without turning them into identities. At night, this understanding is especially powerful. The mind often replays worries about the future, imagining scenarios, outcomes, and losses that have not yet happened. Impermanence interrupts this spiral. It reminds you that whatever comes tomorrow will not stay forever either. This is not pessimism. It is liberation. Think of the seasons. No winter has ever lasted indefinitely. No summer has ever stayed. Each arrives, does its work, and leaves. Life moves in the same way. When you remember this, fear softens. You stop demanding guarantees from a world that never offered them. Impermanence also brings humility. It reminds you that today's successes do not define your worth, and today's struggles do not diminish it. Both are passing conditions. When you stop building your identity around what is temporary, the heart finds steadiness in something deeper than circumstance. There is great comfort in this reflection. It tells the tired mind that it does not need to hold on to today's emotions through the night. Whatever felt heavy today will shift. Whatever felt beautiful does not need to be frozen in memory. You are allowed to let the day move on. When impermanence is embraced, rest becomes easier. The body relaxes because it no longer needs to brace against change. The breath deepens because it is no longer tied to fear of the future. The heart opens because it trusts that life is not trying to trap it in suffering. This reflection also brings appreciation. When you know moments will not return, you meet them more gently. You listen more carefully. You love more honestly. Impermanence makes life precious, not meaningless. At night, when you whisper, "Everything changes, and that is okay," you are giving yourself permission to sleep without guarding the past or fearing the future. You are reminding the mind that it does not need to stay alert to protect what cannot be protected. Let today's emotions pass. Let today's stories dissolve. Let today's version of you rest. Tomorrow will arrive with its own conditions, its own lessons, its own passing moments. You do not need to carry this awareness as a burden. You can carry it as trust. Trust that nothing painful is permanent. Trust that nothing beautiful needs to be owned. Trust that life flows, and you are part of that flow. Impermanence is not something to conquer. It is something to befriend. When you do, the night becomes softer, and the heart learns how to rest within change rather than resist it. Everything changes. And tonight, you can let that truth hold you gently as you sleep. There is a moment just before sleep when the heart is especially open. The body is tired. The mind is quieter. The sharp edges of the day have softened. In this moment, whatever you place into the heart does not stay on the surface. It spreads. It lingers. It shapes the inner world you carry into the night. This is why the final reflection, "May all beings be safe, peaceful, and free," is so powerful. It gently turns the heart outward, beyond the small boundaries of self, beyond the stories of success and failure, beyond the narrow focus of me and my problems. It reminds you that your life is not separate from life itself. Buddhist wisdom calls this practice loving kindness. Not as sentiment, not as idealism, but as a disciplined opening of the heart. A deliberate choice to end the day with care rather than fear. Most people fall asleep thinking about themselves, what went wrong, what still hurts, what might happen tomorrow. The mind contracts around these thoughts, and sleep becomes shallow. But when you extend a wish for safety, peace, and freedom to all beings, something profound happens. The heart expands. The inner atmosphere changes. You begin with yourself because you are included in all beings. May I be safe. May I be peaceful. May I be free. These words are not selfish. They are necessary. A heart denied kindness cannot offer it. When you allow yourself to receive compassion, you soften the inner resistance that keeps suffering alive. You stop treating yourself as a problem to be solved and begin treating yourself as a life to be cared for. From there, the wish naturally extends outward, to those you love, who carry their own quiet struggles. To those you barely know, living lives just as complex as yours. To those who have hurt you, not to excuse their actions, but to release your own heart from hatred. This is not easy. It is a practice. And like all practices, it unfolds gradually. Buddhist teaching does not ask you to force warm feelings where none exist. It asks only for intention. Even the simple wish, "May you be well," begins to loosen the knots inside. Over time, what begins as words becomes a genuine shift in how you relate to the world. Loving kindness is not about changing others. It is about changing the climate of your own heart. When the heart is filled with ill will, sleep is restless. When it is filled with compassion, rest comes more easily. This is not poetic language, it is lived experience. The body responds to the state of the heart. Tension dissolves when hostility fades. The breath deepens when the heart feels open. At night, this reflection becomes a quiet act of courage. In a world shaped by division, comparison, and fear, choosing compassion is a radical act. It says, "I will not let the day harden me. I will not let pain narrow my humanity. I will not carry hatred into tomorrow." When you whisper, "May all beings be safe, peaceful, and free," you are aligning yourself with the deepest intention of Buddhist practice, the liberation of suffering for all, not just for yourself. This does not mean you ignore injustice or deny pain. It means you refuse to let suffering reproduce itself inside you. You choose to end the day without adding more harm to the world, even in the quiet privacy of your own thoughts. There is also humility in this reflection. It reminds you that everyone you encountered today is also seeking safety, peace, and freedom, often in confused or unskillful ways. This understanding softens judgment. It makes room for patience. It reconnects you with the shared vulnerability of being human. As this practice becomes familiar, you may notice subtle changes. Your reactions soften. Your sleep deepens. Your mornings begin with less bitterness. Compassion, practiced at night, does not stay in the dark. It follows you into the next day. The Buddha taught that a mind imbued with loving kindness rests easily. It is protected not by walls, but by openness. When you fall asleep, holding the wish for all beings to be free, you are resting in alignment with something larger than your personal story. You are resting in connection. And connection is one of the deepest forms of peace, so let this be the final movement of your day. Not analysis, not regret, not planning, but a quiet offering of goodwill to yourself and to the world. May all beings be safe. May all beings be peaceful. May all beings be free. Let these words carry you gently into sleep, knowing that in this moment, your heart chose kindness. Change rarely announces itself. It does not arrive with dramatic moments or sudden awakenings. More often, it comes quietly, through small decisions repeated when no one is watching. And one of the most overlooked decisions in a human life is how a day is allowed to end. Most people believe their lives are shaped by what they do during the day by effort, ambition, and outcomes. Buddhism gently reveals another truth. The way you close a day may shape you just as deeply as the way you begin one. Each evening, you are given a choice. You can fall asleep carrying the weight of judgment, resentment, fear, and unfinished stories. Or you can lay those burdens down, one by one, with awareness and care. You can let the night become a continuation of struggle, or you can allow it to become a place of healing. When you consistently end the day with acceptance, gratitude, forgiveness, sincerity, trust in impermanence, and compassion, something subtle begins to change. Not overnight, not all at once, but steadily, unmistakably. Your nervous system learns that it is safe to rest. Your mind learns that it does not need to solve everything to deserve peace. Your heart learns that it can remain open without being overwhelmed. This is the quiet transformation of a life. You may not notice it immediately. But one morning, you wake up with a little less heaviness, a little less self-criticism, a little more patience with yourself and others. You begin to move through the day with less resistance, not because life has become easier, but because you are no longer fighting it in the same way. These evening reflections do not remove pain from life. They change how pain is held. They do not eliminate uncertainty. They teach you how to rest within it. They do not promise control. They offer trust. Buddhist wisdom has always emphasized this kind of transformation. Not through force, not through perfection, but through repeated moments of awareness. A life changes not because it is pushed forward aggressively, but because it is met gently, day after day. Ending the day with mindfulness teaches you how to let go without bitterness. It teaches you how to accept effort without exhaustion. It teaches you how to live without constantly demanding that life be different. This practice reshapes your relationship with time itself. Days no longer blur together in unresolved tension. Each one becomes a complete experience, allowed to arrive and depart without being clutched or condemned. And in this rhythm, something precious emerges: peace that does not depend on circumstances. The Buddha taught that liberation is not found by escaping life, but by seeing it clearly. Evening reflection is one way of seeing clearly. It is a way of honoring your humanity, your limitations, your sincerity, and your connection to all beings. You do not need to master these reflections. You only need to return to them. Night after night, gently, honestly. A life is not transformed by a single realization. It is transformed by how you choose to meet yourself when the day is done. Tonight will come, just as it always does. When it does, you will stand once again at that quiet threshold between what has been and what will be. You will have the chance to decide what you carry forward. May you choose to carry less weight. May you choose to carry more kindness. May you choose to end the day in a way that allows tomorrow to begin with clarity. You do not change your life overnight. You change how you end the day. And that is how a life, slowly and compassionately, becomes something gentler, wiser, and more free. This entire journey has been about something deceptively simple, yet profoundly life-shaping: how we end our days. We often believe our lives are defined by the effort we give during daylight, by productivity, success, and visible progress. Yet this story has gently revealed a quieter truth. The moments before sleep may shape us just as deeply as the hours we spend striving. We explored the evening as a sacred pause, a threshold where the noise of the world finally loosens its grip, and the heart can speak honestly. We saw why the mind refuses to rest at night, because it carries unfinished stories, unspoken forgiveness, and the pressure to be more than human. We learned that the words we whisper to ourselves in this vulnerable space are not harmless. They sink into the subconscious, shaping how we sleep, how we dream, and how we awaken. Through 6 simple reflections, Buddhist wisdom offered a way to close the day with dignity and care. To say today is complete is to release the past without denial. To practice gratitude is to soften scarcity and remember we were supported in ways we often overlook. To forgive ourselves and others is to lay down the weight that poisons rest. To acknowledge I practiced as best as I could is to replace perfection with sincerity. To embrace impermanence is to stop fighting life's natural flow. And to end the day wishing safety, peace, and freedom for all beings is to expand the heart beyond the narrow boundaries of self. Taken together, these reflections do not promise a perfect life. They offer something quieter and more sustainable, a life lived with less inner conflict, less self-punishment, and more compassion. Over time, they transform not just our nights, but our days, because a mind that rests well meets the world with more clarity, patience, and kindness. The deeper lesson. The deepest lesson of this story is that transformation does not begin with dramatic change. It begins with gentleness. When we learn how to let a day end without judgment, we teach ourselves how to live without constantly fighting reality. Peace is not earned by doing more, it is allowed by carrying less. To apply this wisdom in your life, start small. Tonight, choose just one reflection. Speak it slowly, honestly, without forcing belief. Let it settle. Over time, allow the practice to grow naturally. You do not need to master it. You only need to return to it. Night after night, this gentle closing becomes an act of self-respect, and self-respect becomes the foundation for a calmer, wiser life. Your voice matters. Now we would love to hear from you. Which reflection touched you most deeply? How do you usually end your day, and how might that change after watching this? Share your thoughts in the comments so others can reflect and learn from your perspective as well. Your words may offer comfort or insight to someone who needs it tonight. And if this kind of calm, heartfelt wisdom supports you, please subscribe to Buddhism in every moment. Your support gives this channel the strength and motivation to continue creating meaningful, healing content for nights like this and many more to come. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. May your evenings bring peace, and may your days unfold with clarity.